How many of you have done inside-out turning? How many have you done three-sided inside-out turning? How many of you have done two-sided? How many of you have done six-sided? Okay. The three and the six-sided are totally different. The rest of them are the same. It's a fun project. I first watched a video in the middle of the night, which I do a lot when we were living in Texas. The next day I went up to the shop and made this. And I've made a couple more. I mean, they look complicated. They're not. There's a few things that you have to take.
Front of the lighter background. Put it on the headstock. On it.
Then move.
Well, it's just like dancing.
Yeah.
That's what I told you when we were testing the screens earlier. Just leave the screens up in front of this. I'll just stand back here. Of course, then Kennedy yelled at me. Okay, so the process for all of these, except the 3 and the 6, are exactly the same. You start with 4 pieces of wood that are all exactly square. You contemporary glue them together by using the old paper and glue trick. You can turn them and break them apart. This has absolutely no glue on it. These 2 clamps are holding it. I usually take electrical tape and wrap around them just to keep these guys from catching you. But if you pay attention, it won't happen. So take that in heart. But all of these that I have done, I've done in the last 2 weeks, except for this one. Which I did last year for my wife. It's amazing, Doug. Those wives get into a lot of stuff. Okay. And then this one I did just clowning around using tools in the middle of it to get a little bit different. Because whatever you do on the inside will sometimes be highlighted on the outside. A lot of them don't. And then, of course, this one was kind of a disappointment because this is the same wood as this, except I torched it. And I took it and put it in the living room next to this on the coffee table. And my wife said, that needs to be shiny. Lacquer and firewood don't mix. It just, I've sanded this thing down 3 times and refinished it. And finally I said, the hell with it. I'm done. You know, so, and then the snowmen, it's a fun project. This one I did a year or so ago, 2022. Inside it, right now is a little turkey. But these interchange for the different seasons. So I unscrew them from the bottom, put those in, screw them in, and that sits there for the season. And it's just kind of fun. And that's just a little guy an off turning. You waddle turn it and then fill them in. Okay. One more thing. This is a poor man's inside out. This is done with a hole saw. So you just take a square piece of wood, drill it 4 directions, or you can drill all the way through if you want to, if your hole saw will do it, and turn it. And so, you know, I just painted this just so everybody could see. I bought this wood as an old bed frame, and it's pine. It's cheap, crummy pine. It's very soft. It's hard to work with. It sands really good. Every time I put a piece of sandpaper in this, I think of Spence because even he'd love this, which is hard to believe. And then I actually brought this to breakfast, but I put a nose on it since. These were just fun. This is the wood. It shows you the different colors in the natural of the wood. Okay. Now, what I have here, this one I actually had in the sale last year, except it didn't have the red piece inside it. And I think it did have the finial on it. Didn't sell. So my neighbors came by and said something. So I turned the piece in the middle and I used my new beading tool on that. And then the rest of these, this is a three-sided. So you have 3 windows instead of the 4. And I'll show you the pieces that make this, and it's unique because you have to use a table saw in order to make the pieces to be able to turn. And then you have the typical 4, and then with the same pieces, this is a 6-sided. So you have 6 windows. These are tough. John's not here, is he? Because John Armstrong, I talked to him about that. He has done these. And he said he'll never do them again because they're difficult, very difficult to hold together. Now, when you start out, you have the 4 pieces of wood. The critical part of this is how thick you make this. This determines how big your sides are. The further you go down, the more chance you have when you turn it around of having little tiny pieces on the side like this, which are very susceptible to chipping. Now, if you see inside this one, there's a little 3-sided figure inside it, which was fun, because that's just a little tiny piece of wood. And then actually, which is really terrible because these aren't big enough, inside this one is a 2-sided window. I don't know if you can. I know? Okay. So, I mean, you can do just about anything you want inside. The wine glass is removable. So, I mean, if you want to take it out, put something else in, you can. I'm a lot like Chuck. I like to just keep playing and seeing how far I can push the boundaries. So, back to this. So once you start turning it and you get the inside to where you want, which I made this, I'll pass this around. This is a finished, not glued together. So the way these start is all of these pieces are 180. So you turn what we have in this now. Well, I can't get it back there anyhow. So you've got it so it's like this. Then you turn it over and put it back together with the numbers all inside. And then you turn it and you end up with your piece. And that goes for any of them. So whatever, this is just a standard, whereas this one has the little heart or the little cross type. That's all determined by what you do in here. So you'll make a few mistakes. These are pretty thin. Now, I was talking to Spence at breakfast the other morning, and I said, you know, I tried, and I broke a couple of these. And he says, well, you need a 1/4-inch spindle with a detail tool. And I said, Spence, I don't care how sharp the tool is, it doesn't work. So I wished he was here because I actually have my 3/8 that I use, and it's as sharp can get, and it'll knock the corners right off of this thing. So I use my 36 tool. How many people know what that is? 36 grit sandpaper, or sanding belt, and you hold it like this, and you just go back and forth until you get rid of those corners down about that far. Then, well, here. These are numbered on the bottom and the top, and that's the way they orientate once it's back together that way. You can turn them around, play with it. Just this gives you an idea of what it takes to do it. This is the tool that I normally use to start. And I have reground this to more of a spindle than a roughing gouge. I brought the wings back further. I brought because every article, every person that I talked or was in with, the softer the wood, the more angle you need. So I did. I tried it and it works great. But this was the tool that Spence told me I could use. And unfortunately, I listened to Spence a lot. But this was my complaint as far as what people, what I say, the purists that only use steel tools and they go poo-poo to the carbides. Well, they're starting to come around a little bit more because there's things that carbides do. And it's not so much that it's better or worse, it's just easier. And you don't spend an hour, if you're working on hardwood, an hour out of every 3 hours over at the grinder going like this. You know, so there's a place for them. I use a square carbide for doing most of my roughing on bowls and stuff. I use just the corner of it. The harder the wood, the more I use it. It works. So it's whatever works. And I'll guarantee you, if you go to somebody's shop and watch them when they don't know you're watching them, and what they teach are two separate things. Because there's all kinds of shortcuts that people do when they're in their shop that they'd never do in front of an audience like this because they don't think it's kosher. Well, I've been taught all my entire life, whatever works best for you is best for you to work. So it's just that simple. I mean, nobody knows what this is. I use them a lot. I've got 2 sets of these. So it's just, you know, I use this. There's a lot of tools that I use specifically because it's easier. The detail tool, the pointed tool, it's a great tool for getting into places that even a parting tool, an 1/8" parting tool, won't do. That's a nice, sharp little tip. So I use this doing a lot of stuff, figuring in small, tight places on some of these. It's just my preference. Okay, so what we do, once you get it to here, then we take it out. Oh, get out. It was too much work to get the big lathe out today. So you just take these apart. This is the beauty of not having to now go over to the bench and take your best chisel and smack it with a hammer and break this apart. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? Okay, so now we have this, and you simply turn them, and you end up with that puzzle that you guys have in the audience there. And now you have this, which magically turns to this. Okay, so now with this mounted, you have the choice or the option to use the tailstock or not. On something this small, I might put it on for the first outside just for safety. That's good. Now, as we all know, we never have the lathe running when we move the tool rest, unless you're Dan. That's our private joke. Okay. I mean, I see so many of these guys I just watched. What?
You can turn?
Yes.
You have your face shield?
No, it's right here. Yes, ma'am. Oh, well, you're not old.
Repeat the question, please.
The question is, what is the paper glue trick? Back in the old days, like when I was in junior high school, 70 some years ago, 60 years ago, you take a small piece of paper. Well, we used to do it for bowls because we didn't have all the fancy chucks and stuff. So you take a piece of brown paper, like paper sack, you use newspaper, whatever. You put glue on one side, you put glue on the other side, and you sandwich the paper in between. And what that does is that gives you a temporary bond, but you can break it apart because the paper is the weak joint. Okay? So what we do on these is we take about this corner right here, do the same thing, glue it together. Then when you're done, then you set it on the bench or on the lathe, you take a chisel, and you hit down, and it will separate. Okay? This thing's set on the high speed, so I really don't know exactly what kind of RPMs it is turning, but I'm just going to guesstimate somewhere around 1,000 is good, especially when you're doing the open air, because as we all know, the more open air you have, the faster you want to turn, so you spend less time with that tool not supported. And that means you have nothing there. Right, Dean?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. I didn't mean to keep you awake. Okay. So, and the reason that we didn't do an overhead camera, I don't want to hear about how I introduce tools and all that stuff to the wood. Okay, this is my way. Everybody has their own separate, I'm sure the teacher will scold me in January when I go to class, but today it's my show. So we just start. And this is the critical part right here, because this is where you can get in trouble the fastest. As you're coming down, you're starting to thin those sides more and more. The critical area is right in here. And you will notice immediately how close this is centered on here because of the width of where your cut is and the width of where the inside cut is. So as you work along, you can see the shadow, the ghosting in here. It's a little bit. So you can't get in a big hurry, because if you catch once on those little wings, it's over. You'll be starting all over again, and you'll have something for the fire pile. I prefer on this part of it using a push cut. I just feel that I have more control over the tool, and I keep the flute fairly closed so that I'm actually using it as a scraper, because that's always been my point of contention with people that say this isn't a scraper. It is a scraper. It's just that it does a cut scraping instead of just an abrupt scraping. So it still is scraping. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm just looking down here And I just want to get most of that ghosting away. So now I am through to the edge. And it's down here to the end. So you basically just go ahead and do that for the rest of the piece. Then you can start doing all the design work, whatever you want to do up here. I mean, you can see the, what is this? Oh, it's this. Okay. Basically that. This would be the bottom, this would be the top. Or you can do it around. You can do finials. I mean, you can do anything you want to it. But that's the basics for doing a four-sided inside out. So, any questions? Like they always said, God, I must be a great instructor. Okay. So we'll get into these then, because this, I just tried this. This is a three-sided. And the three-sided and the six-sided use the same pieces. These are cut on the table saw at a 30-degree angle. And then they go together like this, where you have two going that way. The six-sided, which is very hard on you, it goes together. This is what you would turn for the inside. And then you would turn them around and it would become this. This takes twice as long to do it, just because you've got six pieces. Plus, I should have sanded these because they've still got some varnish on them from the finish on the bed, and it makes them even slicker. So, but I mean, I like doing this because not very many people do it. The four-sided, I've seen hundreds of. The three and the six, the two actually, there's a guy that turns a heart, and he also does the ring where he does the cutaway for the ring to float on top. Very cool. I'm going to try it, but I just didn't have enough time. You know, I spent 2 weeks on this practically every day in the garage, turning these and doing different experiments and getting everything lined out, because I had a great inspiration from somebody that did a demonstration here not too long ago. And I was very impressed with Kathy's organization. But that's because she's a school teacher. I'm a dumb construction worker. You know, I use, and the question was, when I turn them around, do I glue them? Yes. The type of glue I use, primarily now I'm using Type 3. When I was doing a lot more segmenting, I actually like original Titebond. Original Titebond, you can take two pieces of wood when you're doing segmenting and go hold it for 10 seconds, set it over someplace. Then you can come back. That's the key right there. Set it down. I put them together, glue them together in the orientation they're going to go. Set them for maybe 40 minutes in a clamp, hour at the most. Go turn them. Never had a problem. But Titebond Original is the only one that I've ever tried. I've never tried it with any of the rest of them. But I don't know. I'm not a big fan of waiting, 24 hours to do things. That's why 99.9%, well, maybe 96.9% of all of my work is finished with shellac, because I want it done. I want it dry. The only other thing that I use a lot of is spray lacquer, because it's done. I don't have 3-4 days. I don't have the patience to do it. That's like the beading and all that painting and stuff. Like I tell my wife every day, there's not enough wine in the world for me to do that. I can't do it. It's not me. I'm a production person. Yes. In conjunction with another glue, yes. By itself, no. It's brittle. It will pull apart. It is a permanent bond, but you also have something hitting it. I've had a lot of CA glue that I've tried to fix things with, crack and chip out because it's so hard. I don't know. What's the feeling of people here that turn all the time and use it?
Yeah, I agree. It's too brittle.
It's just the most comments are it's too brittle.
I learned the hard way at home.
Well, now we have the voice of reason sitting back there in his red, white, and blue. Doug Rowe just said it doesn't work. And if he knows anything about things that don't work, watch his TikTok channel. Because that clock, I watched him turn that clock. My arms hurt. I mean, he was like this. And I'm going, geez, Doug, I know you've got a sander. Why didn't you run it through? Or better than that, why didn't you start with pieces that were this thick since your resin was only that thick? You know, but he just loves abuse. That's why he's a school teacher. And the question was, or the statement was, if you use the accelerator, it becomes more brittle. I mean, that's like I went to using the dark walnut CA on the darker woods, but you got to let it dry. If you hit it with that accelerator, it clouds, turns white. So I use CA glue sparingly. I just watched the Mike Mahoney, the demonstration that he did for the club last year or the year before. He doesn't use any glue on his bowls. And I'll tell you, if you haven't watched that or seen him, amazing. The man makes thousands of salad bowls. He's been doing it for 30 some years. He's got 2 kids in college. He lives in a gorgeous place in Northern California. He has trees delivered and he processes them green and sells blanks to people like us. But I was so impressed. I'd seen him turning and doing stuff, but the talk that he gave was just incredible. I really appreciated sitting there and watching it so much that I think it started at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and at 4:30 I finally went back to bed. I couldn't stop watching him and listening to it. So I hope by passing that around, people can understand that haven't turned, or even if they have turned them, what it takes. And it's fun. I mean, it's just as much decoration as you want to put in what you start turning from the inside. And the more you push it, the more chance you're going to have of making a mistake. But mistakes are what we learn. You know, I've never made the mistake, so. But I'm sure Dean can attest to the fact that we're all perfect. He just owns it to a finer. I don't have to bring an apple now, do I, first day? So I hope you guys all enjoyed this and learned something. And if you want to come up here and look at these and see how much work went into them, and it wasn't that much. I usually do one of these probably 2 hours. The hardest part comes down to when you start this stuff, though. This stuff is so simple to sand. And then as you're sanding, you have to finish the insides of these. Normally, you have to hand sand with the grain on the sides, because as it's spinning, it's bouncing. And I did a demonstration at my shop on sanding, and I opened that one with, this is going to be the easiest demonstration I've ever done, because there's only one way to do it. Right? So, each and every person has their own way of doing things. The only thing, when the softer the wood, actually the harder it is, because it wants to scratch.
Is it possible to make something in this inside when you're turning this, or it always has to be made separately?
Well,
repeat the question.
The question was, is there any way to turn the piece on the inside that you wouldn't have to make a separate piece? It's out of my pay grade.
Okay.
I mean, if you just take and turn this around, this is going to be your inside, okay? So you would have to figure out some way of suspending that in this area. And I'm sure it could be done. Well, no, you'd have to chisel, because there's no way you can get inside for the 3-dimensional aspect of it. So And the thing is, if you do want to put something inside, make sure that your opening's big enough. I've got this little guy here that I turned, and I was going to put him in one of these. He won't fit. So you got to do a little bit because he's too tall. It's just like he wouldn't fit in this one. You know. So I got on a snowman kick there for a while, but I also do little trees. I do, you know. In fact, if anybody needs to teach Doug how to do a Christmas tree, because he had to buy one.
My wife bought that thing.
If anybody doesn't know that story, he was at the sale last weekend and he was walking around. And not only did he buy a Christmas tree that was turned by Gary, but it's mesquite. Doug has a backyard full of mesquite. And it probably would have taken him, what, an hour and a half to turn? It's about an hour and a half to turn that. Didn't have time. So his wife bought one at the sale. You know?
Don't tell Gary I sent it
Well, that's like I said at the sale, and I heard this from some people last year. I should have just bought everything at the sale, taken it back to the shop, sanded it off, put my name on it, taken it down to Fountain Hills next year, and sold it for 3 times what I paid for it. I mean, there's so much truth to that. That's why I haven't sold a piece in 8 years. I give them away. I just don't. Now, you guys did real well at the sale. So I don't do it. I don't care anymore. Most of these are going to go in for the club. The one on the end, the long, thin one, I actually had that in the sale last year, except it didn't have the red piece on the inside. I had it hanging there in my garage while I was doing the rest of these. And my neighbors came down and went, he came in first, and Steve goes, God, I really like that. It's different. It's long, it's thin. I'm okay. So then 2 days ago, his wife comes in and she's looking at him and she's going, wow, I really like that. So that one's going to them this afternoon. You know, all of my neighbors have thumb crosses, which I do. This is the 6, and the 3 is just the 3 pieces. It's the same process. The only thing is you have to take these and run them through your table saw. And the trick is, whatever the thickness of wood is how far you set it to the base of the blade, and then you cut it at 30 degrees. And then you just flip it, put it up against the fence, run it through, flip it, so you come up with the diamond shape. So, any other questions, comments?
Thank you, Bob. Very nice demonstration. It's pretty cool stuff.
It is, and it's fun because, I mean, a lot of the people I know have done this. And it's kind of like when I started, I went, yeah, I'll make 1 or 2 of these. Well, then, you know, a couple months ago, I made one last year for the exchange. I think Jenny got that one. And she always said, I want to learn how to do that. And I said, you know, one of these days we'll do it. You know, now that I've been program director, I'm starting to look. So each and every one of you, be ready, because you're going to be asked politely the first time and then kind of told the second time, we need more cooperation from our members. Damn it, there's a lot of talent in this club. I mean, when people see the work that I do and stuff, they go, wow, and I go, oh no, you haven't seen anything yet. You come to and look at the stuff. It's like the piece that Wayne sold to my neighbor. I mean, he stole that. There's a lot, and people don't understand what it takes to create this stuff. And we need to educate more and more people on what it takes to do it. And, you know, so I know there's some other people. Actually, the one thing that we've been fighting over the day to put him in is Gary doing the
Wave bowl.
You know, because he's going to by the time we do it in September now, He's gonna know how he made that mistake.
I've done the demo before, so.
Well, no, I know the demo, but making the mistake where those lines came together. You gotta learn how to do that so you can teach us.
Yeah.
He's agreeing, but he's shaking his head no.
Mm.
Okay, guys, thank
Well,
you.
thank you very much, Zim. So